it's pretty clear that the DNC does not want a primary. They, I don't want to say that they want a coronation, but that's, I think that that's a fair way to put it, actually. They're doing, they're essentially, they're fixing the process so that it makes it almost impossible to have democracy function. They're effectively disenfranchising the Democratic voters from having any choice in who becomes president, or who becomes the Democratic nominee. So two of the things they've done to date is they've moved the Iowa primary. They've made rules that if anybody campaigns in Iowa, or any candidate sets foot in the state of Iowa or sets foot in the state of New Hampshire, then none of the votes that are cast for that candidate will be tallied. In other words, any delegate that I win in New Hampshire or Iowa would go instead to the president. And now they're trying to change it so that if I campaign in New Hampshire, that none of the votes cast for me in Georgia will count. And that's significant because it's hard to win the nomination without Georgia.
What is the logic?
Well, they're rigging it so that effectively, we're looking at the tabulations now that look like if you add up all the super delegates that they control and all of the automatic delegates that just go to the party and go to the president, I would have to win almost 80% of all of the states in order to beat President Biden, even if he only wins 20%.
And yet you continue on. So what is your strategy then in light of this for defeating President Biden?
These rules will not be finalized until September 14th, and we've written the DNC protesting. I mean, there's some really wild things that they're now considering, including forcing me to actually pay for the primaries. And their logic is that they don't need a primary because they already have a candidate. And therefore, I'm costing them all this money, and that money should be paid for by me and, maybe Marianne Williamson. So it's not, it's a process that is rigged. And we live at a time in American history when a lot of Americans think that democracy is broken, that the political system is rigged, and that there's not really any democracy. And unfortunately, the DNC is taking a lot of steps that confirm that outlook.
If the decision holds for the current, sort of primary structure with the DNC, what is the route to victory for you against President Biden?
Oh, if the DNC is going to rig it so that it is simply impossible for anybody to challenge President Biden, then I need to look at other alternatives, because I can't go back to the people support me and to my donors and say, I'm in this to make a point. I need to show them a road to victory.
What kind of alternatives would you be exploring, Mr. Kennedy?
Well, I don't know exactly, because I want to see what the DNC does. I want to see if they make it a fair contest. And I'm not asking that it be 100% fair, but I'm asking that there at least be, a chance that it be plausible for somebody else to win other than their, chosen anointed candidate.
There you go, saying, I'm not asking for it to be 100% fair. Well, I would like it to be 100% fair. I don't know, that's just me. I think it's really interesting, though, that, he's like, well, I just make it somewhat more fair, not 100% fair. Okay, so let me explain exactly what's going on and what he's talking about. It's really unclear what exactly he's talking about. He's got a little bit of inside information, I think, that hasn't been put out there in the public. But the background information that we know, and what we know for sure that's going on inside of the DNC, is that essentially the DNC wants South Carolina to be the very first primary. They claim the reason is because South Carolina is more diverse. That's what the DNC is saying. We all know the truth. The truth is that in 2020, there were 3 primaries held prior to South Carolina. There was Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. And Joe Biden lost in all 3 of those. He did not win any of those primaries. He didn't win until South Carolina. And after he won South Carolina, he supposedly picked up momentum, and then he ended up being the eventual nominee. So because of that, they don't want an embarrassment again. They don't want to embarrass the sitting president of the United States and have him lose Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada to maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Marianne Williamson, who knows, or anybody else who decides to jump in the race. At this point, there isn't. But they don't want to risk it, so they want South Carolina to be the first one. That's why they're doing this. It's not because of diversity. So what they have done in order to prevent this, now New Hampshire has in their rules, now Iowa has a caucus, New Hampshire has a primary. They're the very first primary. And New Hampshire's constitution is written where they are to be the very first primary in the country. And if primaries get moved up in other states, then they move theirs up. That's how they do it. So the DNC has said to New Hampshire, well, you can't do that this time. You have to be after South Carolina. New Hampshire says, well, it's in our state constitution, and we've had a 100-year tradition being the very first primary in the country, and we're not going to change our ways now. We're proud of this. We like this. We want to continue doing this. And the DNC says to New Hampshire, do it. If you do it, you will be sanctioned. And this is what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about, the sanctions that New Hampshire would face. It came out that the DNC was discussing essentially half of the delegates would not be counted, that if New Hampshire held their primary earlier than South Carolina, that they would be sanctioned by losing half of their delegates. They're doing all of these really crazy rules. So they're just trying to really, really strong arm and discourage these states. And then in addition, discourage the candidates from allowing those states to have their primaries first. Now, those states are planning on and probably will just have their primaries first. And they will just tell the DNC, you don't get to change your rules just so that you don't embarrass the sitting president. Democracy is democracy. You so-called defenders of democracy. Here's the DNC saying, we've got to win. Democrats have to win or else democracy dies. And here they are, again, being the most anti-democratic party that there is out there right now. And they're rubbing it in our faces. They're not even shy about it. And yet they're trying to gaslight us into making us believe that they're the democratic ones. They're the ones who are actually protecting democracy. And